Merry Christmas! In my review of the first Sonic Adventure game, I had a little bit in there about 2D franchises making the jump into 3D. It was the thing to do in the 90s besides heroin and making bad techno music. I mean, every franchise had to do it eventually. But the issue is, some of them were going on 14 years old. Mario, Mega Man, Metal Gear, all franchises from the previous decade that started off as 2D games. But then we come to Pokémon. By the time it made the jump into 3D on the Nintendo Ultra 64, it had only been a little over 3 years old. I mean, at least in Japan. Over here, it was barely 1. The franchise was still in its infancy, but then Pokémon Stadium doesn't exist to be the series' eventual natural progression past sprites flatter than your waifu's chest, but for another purpose. See, Mario, Zelda, Metal Gear, those were all chasing innovation. They wanted to turn what you thought their games were right onto their heads. But Pokémon, well, the main games had a competitive element to them that didn't really translate well into being viewed on a big screen. So, Nintendo did the most Nintendo thing that they possibly could and made an entire game solely for the purpose of making Pokémon tournaments more exciting to watch. Gee. Bet the Smash community is seething at the thought of Nintendo going well out of their way to further a game's competitive scene. Yeah, Pokémon Stadium exists solely for the competitive Pokémon scene, which is why... Oh wow, only 3 paragraphs in and I already get to use this phrase. The game is bare bones as fuck, which is pretty much by design. See, the game was literally only really meant to be used for Pokémon tournaments. Tournaments back in the day would use the Game Boy versions, and let me tell you, there's not a lot of excitement to be had watching 2D sprites clumsily slide about the screen. So Nintendo EAD, the same team behind damn near every single major franchise Nintendo has put out, put together a game that consisted only of the Pokémon most frequently used in Japanese competitions. And that made for a game with only, say 48 out of the 151 potential little bastards out there. And it also kept a lot of the glitches prevalent in the original Japanese Game Boy titles, but more on that later. By default, the game only allows you to rent your Pokémon, with each one being level 50 and only having a very small pool of moves to select from. But then Nick, you gloriously handsome son of a bitch you, how will we have actual tournaments if we can't bring over our Pokémon from the Game Boy games over to our cutting-edge 64-bit machine that rots our brains and plays Turok? I mean, you can see, it doesn't fit at all. 2 words, bitchachos. Transfer pack. Yes, every single fucking copy of Pokémon Stadium came bundled with one of these glorious little babies. A transfer pack, spelled P-A-K because not spelling things correctly was just the thing you did in the fucking 90s. This guy here allowed you to transfer all sorts of shit from your Game Boy games right into your, for its time, high-tech Nintendo 64. And quite a few games used it, actually. Pokemon being the biggest one, but there was Perfect Dark. You fucking forgot that there was a Game Boy Color version of Perfect Dark. You fucking did. Don't you lie to me. I know you did. This thing is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's fucking cool as shit to see all of the Pokemon you raised on the Game Boy now in glorious 3D. And honestly, I think the models in this game still hold up really well. They look great, and even the textures in this game don't seem to have the usual stretched, blurry look that a lot of N64 titles had back in the day. But the downside is getting this thing to even work. Half the time it would work fine, but then something would happen. I'd set the controller down to use the bathroom or grab a drink, or worse, my incredibly needy girlfriend would require me to open a jar of pickles for her, and somehow the simple motion of setting the controller down or picking it up would cause the transfer pack to disconnect, killing whatever progress I was making.
and you can't simply just plug and unplug it. You have to turn the console off, adjust it, turn it back on, hope it works, pray to several pagan gods, maybe a human sacrifice, and if it doesn't, you gotta do all of that all over again. And if you have a 90s game room kind of setup, then you can add getting off your ass, nudging the dog out from its spot by your feet, and walking over to your Nintendo 64 to the list of things to do.
And surprisingly, Pokemon Stadium, again, is not the only game to use the transfer pack, as Mario Tennis, Golf, and, again, that game that you all forgot existed, Perfect Dark on the Game Boy Color, made use of it in some way. Hell, even that shitty Beast Wars game on the N64 somehow got some use out of it. Only in Japan, which I'm sure makes Matt McMuscle sad. I'm positive he is just going... Why couldn't we get that in the West? That's what he'd say. That's much better than the Halloween one. It's still not good.
I won't be going into the mechanics of Pokemon in this video, as that's going to be covered in the next one, but they're pretty much the exact same. Just, you know, imagine that the other video came out prior. But what's different in Stadium is the presentation. You see, the Game Boy games, well, fine, they lacked flair. They lacked pizzazz, but Stadium has all the fucking pizzazz you could ask for. Every battle is filled with this grand, massive feeling, almost like watching MMA. Hell, someone make a mod for Stadium where the commentator is replaced with Joe Rogan. And this is all helped by one man, Ted motherfucking Lewis, the man behind the voice of the sexiest penguin in all of Dreamland.
You downright spiffy yourself!
Serenades us with some fantastic commentary for our weird-ass virtual cockfighting video game. And honestly, the game would not be nearly as fun without him. His commentary really does add a lot to the game, with him commentating on damn near everything going on with way more energy than it deserves. Like, he could have phoned every single line in, but just everything he says makes the on-screen action all the more believable.
The trainer hasn't issued an order. What's that? Super effective! What now? Oh, the attack missed!
And it also helps that the voice clips are incredibly high quality, especially for the N64. The voice compression was all done by Factor 5, the same studio behind great games like Star Wars Rogue Squadron and, Lair on the PS3. The game modes are all pretty simple. You have Gym Leader Castle, where it essentially takes the premise of the main games, but just trims out all of the stupid RPG stuff. This is probably the mode that you'll spend the most time in. Each tower of the castle has 4 fights, 3 regular trainers, and then the gym leader themselves. While I stated previously that the main Pokemon gameplay is here, I feel that it's somewhat different due to every Pokemon being on an equal playing field. Typing, I feel, matters a hell of a lot more in this game than it did in Red and Blue. While I felt you could just brute force your way through a lot of fights in Blue, in Stadium, your Pokemon choices matter so much more. And of course, me being me, I made all of the wrong choices and generally just ignored the type matchups, just using whatever I had on hand because, to quote Marge Simpson,
I just think they're neat.
Of course, this is when the rental Pokemon come in handy because you can just use whatever the hell you want, and while each one has some perplexing moveset choices, they are generally fine to play with.
But that's kind of the key word, it's fine. If you want to get the... that hurt, that last one hurt, it physically hurt. But that's kind of the key word, fine. If you want to get the most out of your copy of Pokemon Stadium, you need this. You really need the transfer pack, which, I don't know, it kind of hurts the game a fair bit. Like, my transfer pack cost me $50. I only paid $20 for the game, and Pokemon Blue cost me another $50. I got red and yellow too. So, this means that if you want to get as much enjoyment as possible from Pokemon Stadium, you need a copy of the game, a transfer pack, a copy of Red, Blue, or Yellow, which the cartridges alone are $50 to $60. And altogether, that's a fuckload more than the game cost at launch. And here we are complaining about new game prices. Old games are just as expensive.
But this is just part of the game, and honestly, the Gym Leader Tower is, well, is fun. Again, it's the main game's gameplay with nice, crisp, clean 3D visuals. And speaking of the graphics, holy shit, is this game a fucking looker. I said earlier that this was the first 3D Pokemon, and it's only really a half-truth. This is technically the second Pokemon Stadium, but along with those wonderful 64-bit models, you also get some really expressive animations, like when Venusaur gets stoned as fuck, and then the trainer shouts that there's a cop off screen, so he tries to act sober. Or my favorite is Snorlax. This simple animation of him half sitting up before realizing that takes way too much effort and just lying back down tells you everything you need to know about Snorlax. Some of the animations are also just fucking hilarious. Like whenever Nidorina gets hit, she does this weird little dance. But not all of the animations look great. Like Dig or when Charizard uses Fly.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
But there's way more hits than misses here, and usually even the bad ones are still charming in their own way. The one thing I did notice while playing is that the RNG feels way worse here than in the original games. I have looked it up and apparently everything has the same chances of happening, but maybe because this is just battles, the flaws of the first game's battle system is a little more obvious. My biggest issue is that if something has the chance of inflicting a status ailment, it absolutely will. Almost without fail. And to make this more frustrating is that the game has no items, meaning if one Pokemon gets frozen, it's practically the same as being knocked out. And since this is tournament rules we's playing by, 2 frozen or paralyzed Pokemon counts as a loss. I'd also come across some weird moments where Pokemon will have moves that I wouldn't think they could learn. Like I brought my Graveler into Lieutenant Surge's gym thinking I was being clever, only to be met by an Electabuzz that knew Psy-Wave, completely negating the defensive benefits my Pokemon had, which, I mean, okay, not really the fault of the game, that one's on me, but yeah, still, like, how the fuck was I supposed to predict that his Electabuzz would know Psy-Wave? And just like Pokemon Puzzle League, this game is pretty damn hard. Now, in a way, that does make it a lot more exciting, because when you're down to your last Pokemon and he's got like a gnat's dick worth of HP left and you somehow just win, it fills you with the same kind of joy that I only get from eating Cheez-Its in the shower. I also feel like I should mention the music, because I kind of just... I'm gonna glance over it in my Pokemon Blue review, but it's good. See, the issue with Blue is that it's kinda limited by the Game Boy, the compositions are solid, but the hardware just can't put out the music that's on par with the N64, and it all sounds wonderful. The trainer theme, the gym leader battles, everything sounds great and gets you amped for some kind of exciting battles. Besides the castle, you can also do free battles with friends up to 4 players, making damn good use out of the N64's 4 controller ports.
But then, what if you want to play Pokemon Stadium, but you don't want to play Pokemon Stadium? Well, there's a couple Mario Party-styled minigames to take your mind off the white-knuckle turn-based action. And this is gonna get me some shit, but they suck. All of them. All of them suck. Not a single one of them is fun. Now, I only cared enough to play like 2/3 of them, being the thorough professional that I am. But if 6 out of 9 suck, I'm not going to dig around in hopes that the last 3 aren't shit.
I will be the first to admit that I used to play a lot of Mario Party growing up. I didn't like it, but it was something to do, and I always wanted to enjoy it. The thing is, these kinds of games are dependent on something I didn't exactly have in abundance, which is friends. And part of the fun is seeing your friends' reactions when you royally fuck them over. And I guess that's the allure here too. I don't know, I didn't find these all that fun. I know a lot of people really liked them, but to me, they're just space on the cartridge that could have gone to something more enjoyable. And the lick-a-tongue one just sucks, but likely due to my N64 joystick having the same level of apathy towards working as your average liberal arts college student does.
And now I'd like to discuss the biggest thing for me. At least it was to me as a kid back in the 90s when this game came out. The Game Boy Tower. See, Pokemon Stadium essentially runs through an emulator using the exact same code as the original Game Boy title. It was coded in 1 week by the man, the myth, the legend, and I won't even use a crudely photoshopped image of his face on the Giga Chad meme, because the Giga Chad meme fucking wishes he was Satoru Iwata.
Satoru Iwata, an absolute goddamn legend in the gaming industry. This man is damn near responsible for what few good childhood memories I have. Whether it be coding this game in a damn week, his work on Earthbound, which, I mean, without Earthbound I wouldn't be able to dunk on NES. Hell, when Nintendo was trying to find a lead developer for NES Open Golf, everyone said it couldn't be done. Iwata then promptly tore off his sleeves, revealing 32-inch pythons, and flexed the goddamn ROM out of his triceps. Or so my drunken uncle, who totally works at Nintendo, tells me. And it's because the game runs off that same code that the Game Boy games use, that you can use Pokemon Stadium to play the Gen 1 games on your N64. No other game works with it, I tried. And honestly, if for whatever reason you have to play the originals, this is probably the best way to play them. After beating Gym Leader Castle, it allows you to play the game with speed hacks, making the grinding a lot more tolerable than if you had to play them on original hardware. And it even loads the entire game on the console's RAM, so if you have issues with your transfer pack being a fucking cocksucker, like I did, then you don't need to worry if it comes loose. And it will, out of sheer spite, because all of my N64 controllers can't seem to hold onto the goddamn transfer pack to save their lives. And if you think you're being clever by using one of those newer Brawler 64 pads, you're shit out of luck. Because that slot on the Brawler 64 is pretty much just for decoration. I have never gotten anything to work with it. Well, you will be spending most of the time playing Stadium, either, fighting your friends or fighting through Gym Leader Castle. It does have one other mode, which is the Pokémon Cup. This is a pretty standard arcade ladder for the most part, but does do some kind of neat things. It offers up 4 different rule sets to take that affect things like the levels of Pokemon used, as well as what or how many Pokemon can be used. It's a neat, albeit simple arcade mode that's fun and does a few small things to keep it from just being a run-of-the-mill arcade mode that you'd see in most fighting games. There's also special Pokemon you can unlock from beating it that you can transfer to your copy of Red or Blue, but I never managed to unlock them. If I did, then this video would not be coming out on time.
But the major question I have is this. Is it even really worth playing Pokemon Stadium nowadays? Yeah, I mean, it served the purpose of making official Pokemon tournaments a lot easier to display at actual events, but why should you play it? Well, I honestly couldn't recommend that you play it, unless you, for whatever reason, have a massive nostalgia boner for it, which is why I am giving it 5 rose-tinted glasses out of 5. Ignore every negative thing I said about this game because I played it as a child.
Pokemon Stadium, it really isn't a game that needs to be played in the modern day. I mean, no game is, really, but Stadium is probably the one that needs to be played the least. And that's not even saying it's bad, because it's not. It's a very impressive game. Pokemon Stadium is damn good. It's fun, and whatever issues I had with the battle system in Blue, quickly overshadowed by some of the fantastic visuals, charm, and of course, Ted motherfucking Lewis. Seeing all of the first 151 Pokemon in 64-bit glory was a huge deal back in the day, and this game hits all the notes that I wanted it to. But it's also obsolete. We have better technology now, and I mean, I haven't played any of the newer games, but I have to assume that they are good, right? I mean, why would a company put out something that's inferior?
Insert UFC 4 joke here.
But despite that obsolescence, Pokemon Stadium is still fun. It still has that charm and sense to it that you're taking part in these highly fantastical battles. And I guess if you just want to have fun with your friends and have some quick Pokemon battles, all while sitting on your couch and using your nice big flat screen television, then I guess Stadium does still serve some sort of purpose. I don't know, maybe it's the cynic in me, but I feel out of any Pokemon game I've played, Stadium is the one that I enjoy the most, but has the least reasons for me to come back to it. Maybe you'll feel different. Who knows?